In this video, I'll talk about some of the features of the testing screen. Some of this stuff is obvious, but I'll just go over the different areas. So on the left, there's the graphs. You can see we have our switched graph on the top. The second graph is the moving average graph, and you can see that the two checkboxes for these graphs are checked here. When there's two graphs displayed, there's a slider in the middle here that you can use to adjust the size up or down. But there are some other graphs we can look at, and we can select these by clicking the checkbox. So there's a Williams %R, and there's a Bollinger Bands, RSI, MACD. So you can turn on the various graphs by checking these checkboxes. Next, notice that beneath the graphs there's some date sliders. The top slider is for the start date, and the bottom slider is for the end date. So if I want to adjust the time period, I can click on the slider and drag it, and you'll see a yellow bar in the graphs above. That'll indicate where in the graph you want to stop. So if I want to stop in 2008, this is going to show me the graph from 2008 to 2013. Okay, so you see how the graph's updated when I made that choice. So that's adjusting the start date. I can adjust the end date in the same manner. So if I want to see the graph from 1994 to 2006, I slide the graph here, and it updates. In the graph panel here, you can see there's a checkbox for showing legends. So you can uncheck this, which makes the graphs a little larger. There's also a button on the right here. This can be used to expand the graphs to be full screen. So if I click this button, the graphs become much larger. And then to get back to the screen, I click the button on the upper right. There's a green line button here next to the switched graph. If I click on this button, you can see what happens. So if I click back and forth, you can see what it's doing is for each period where each of the individual stocks is owned, instead of the daily prices, it's creating a simple line that shows what the start and end points were for each of those periods. So it's another way to look at the graph. I'll scroll the window down here. So we have a save button, which is used to save a strategy. There's an update button where after you update some of the parameters, you can click update to refresh the graph. And beneath these buttons, there's a daily information section here. And it contains numerous rows of information. And this information changes depending on where the cursor is in the graph. So I'm going to drag the cursor across the graph here, and you can see various things updating. For example, what stock we're owning during each of these periods, the price of some of these items, the date, etc. I'll scroll the window back up. So here we have the Params tab. This holds the fund list. The funds are listed here. Now next to each fund there's a plus button and a minus button. The minus button deletes the fund. So if I want to delete fund 12, I click the minus button. I'll do the same for fund 11. The plus button is used to replace the current stock with a different stock. So I'll click the plus button here and I'll replace APA with Nike. So you see Nike was placed in the fund 10 position after doing the replacement. And next to each of these stocks in the list, there's also a checkbox we can check. And when I click the checkbox, it adds each of these stocks to the graph. It's kind of hard to see some of these. If I move the time period back some, they should show up better. Okay, so there's a better view of some of these stocks. So if I unclick these, you'll see these start to disappear. Beneath the stock list, there's a trade rule drop down. And when you're using a momentum trend strategy, like we are here, you can only use the moving average trade rule. The other trade rule options are only available if the strategy contains two funds. So I'll delete some of these. So after deleting all but two of these funds, the trade rule option gives you some additional options. So there's MACD, MACD Bollinger, MACD RSI. I won't go into these here. The right side of the screen contains a list of funds. You can select funds from the list. If I click the green button, it will add the fund or stock, in this case Apple. If I click the green button, it's going to add Apple to the strategy. If I click the link, what I first do is I click the button for Apple, you see it gets highlighted with a green border. And then to replace Apple with another fund, I click the link. So I'll click the link for AIG, and we'll replace Apple with AIG. In the funds area here, there's a drop down that you can use to select the various fund lists. So I'll select S&P 100. That will update the list with those stocks. Next, there's a results tab that I can visit. In the results tab, it shows you information about each of the stocks in the strategy. So in this case, we have VFINX, PTTRX, and AIG. So there's an end value, which tells you the end value of your investment if you started with the starting investment, which is set in the params tab. In this case, it defaults to $20,000. So if you were to invest the $20,000 in VFINX, it would have grown to $107,000. PTTRX would have grown to $52,000. And AIG would have dropped to $6,240. It also shows the total gain, compound gain, and maximum drawdown for each of these stocks. Beneath this, there's the same information for the switch strategy, which is what we see here, the colorful switched line. It shows the end value, total gain, compound gain, maximum drawdown. It also tells you the number of trades and the number of trades per year. So this strategy is trading 2 times a year. It's currently owning AIG. Finally, we have a third tab here, the testing tab, and this is the automatic testing tool. There's another video we have that explains the details about how this works. There's one other thing I wanted to show you about this screen, and that is if you have a large monitor, you can go to the settings page and turn large screen mode on. Currently it's off. If I click the button and turn large screen mode to on, and then we go back to the testing screen, you'll notice that the parameters panel and the results panel and the testing panel are all separated, and so you don't tab between them, they're all displayed on the screen. We highly recommend using a large screen monitor with TrendTimer. Thank you for watching. For more information about the TrendTimer software and service, please visit www.trendtimer.com.